Lemon Mead, Part 2.
Okay, so we started this on November 19th of 2020. Today is January 7th of 2021. That makes it a grand total of about 6 weeks or so. But that's all good. 6 weeks for a primary is actually quite wonderful. We are going to skip the take a reading, wait a week, take another reading because it's been 6 weeks. I don't see any bubbles. I see zero activity in this. So, you know what? Sometimes you just know it's done. Why did it take us 6 weeks to get to it? And why is that not a problem? Well, life happens, and 6 weeks is nothing. We had another one that took 3 months, so it's no big deal. But what I do want to do is take a reading on this right now. And I'm leaving the lemon in there for the moment because I don't want to upset everything before I take a reading. That could throw the reading off a little bit. I just don't feel like taking that risk. Oh, wow. Remember the limoncello that we made? Kind of smells like that. Now, this started with a 1.140 gravity, which is pretty high. We did use 3.52 pounds of honey, and yes, it was 3.52 pounds. Don't ask me why I have my notes that way, but that's what it was. And that is not floating yet. So let's see. Get just a little bit in here. Nope. Is it floating now?
No.
Can you get the glass ready?
No.
I make messes and I know things, okay? We say that. Now it's floating. All right, there you go. Okay, so our final gravity on this, pretty reasonable. That's where I usually aim for, although with some new things that we're going to be doing, we're going to be going a little bit lower. This is at 1.022 final gravity. So let me write that down. Quick calculation here for you. We started with a 1.140 gravity minus 1.022 gravity equals 0.118. I like to use the coefficient of 135. Some people like 131.25, and that's perfectly fine too. 135 is a little bit more efficient and more accurate once you get past, like, say, 10% or so, so I like to use that. So I'm going to multiply that by 135. That gives me 15.93%, which, I always round down a little bit, so 15.5% sounds good to me. Now, this was the first time we ever used Premier Blanc yeast, and I have to say, it stood up to the reputation that I'd heard about it, is that it's a good fermenter. It's very similar to our Lalvin 71B, is what people say. So, awesome. So far, I mean, it went above and beyond its tolerance. I believe it is a 15% yeast. It went to 15.5. It might be a 14% yeast. I'll probably correct myself right here, because I don't have the packet in front of me. But I want to pour this into a pitcher. We're going to show you why we used the rumble jar to do this. And here's why. I just have to pick up this thing right here, and all the liquid comes out of it. All the lemons in here, everything like that, is all the lemon peel is all inside this. So it did not make a mess. We do have lease, and we are going to totally rack this. I want to just get this into a thing there. It's going to drain out the side weird, and I think that's just falling off the top. You see how it does that? It's because the bottom is actually solid, so you have to hold it to the side a little bit to get the last bit out. We could just let that sit for a minute. Some more drops might come out. But before we take any further action, let's give this a smell and a quick taste. My first impression on the smell was that it was actually really nice. It has a lovely citrusy smell. It should have a mild amount of sweetness still. Oh wow, that's actually really nice. It's a little bitter, but I think it's still kind of young. 6 weeks. I think with age, this would be really nice. I don't want to sweeten it. I'm kind of afraid of back sweetening things past 10-20 at this point. I really don't think it's a good idea. So, a little bit of a phenolic, like an acetone to it. That just means it's young. It needs some time. But it fermented beautifully clean, really. I mean, it went strong for like 3-4 weeks, and then it was done. Here, you want to finish that, or you want me to finish it?
I'm finishing it.
Okay. All right, so we are going to rack this to a pitcher first, because I'm not sure how much volume we lost using the rumble jar, and there's a little bit of least at the bottom. So we'll see what we get. I do have the cap on my auto siphon because there's a lot of goop in the bottom of that jar. So while you weren't watching, I poured the cup of rumble jar. It was like a teaspoon more, but it's fine. We actually have about 3.3 to 3.4 liters here. So I am going to put it back into the gallon container. I don't think there's going to be too much headroom, and I think it's fine. So we're just going to do that right now. Okay, when you get to this end here, and there's that little bit left, you have some options. You can either pour it into the pitcher, like the fermenter, or pour it down your gullet. There we go. Problem solved. It was like literally a teaspoon. When I talk about head space, what I mean is the space between the liquid and the top of the jar. Now, in this case, you can see that it's just barely at the shoulder of this jar. That's a good amount. It's fine. There's no need to worry. A little higher is better, but it's not that big of a deal. This has high enough alcohol content to not be a problem, okay? So we won't be making vinegar. Worst case, slight off flavors if we let it sit too long, or if we shook it up or something stupid. But we're not going to do that. We're just going to put the lid on it. We're going to leave the airlock on it. And then what are we going to do with it?
We're going to let it sit.
Probably a few more weeks at least. I want this to totally clear out. Give it a little bit more time to age. There's no rush. You can bulk age this in here. No problem. I can let this sit for a year if I want to, and then bottle it at that point. But we want to see it clear a little bit, give it a little bit more age, because it did taste just a little bit young. So you'll see that in about the next 5 seconds. So 3 weeks went by, and it doesn't look like much has happened. Let's take our reading and find out. This is where a lot of people seem to get confused, and that is taking readings at the end. We did a video on that, and in that video we talked about take a reading, wait a week, take another reading. Now in this case, we took a reading 3 weeks ago. If this is the same, or within like a point or two, it's done. So that's all this is for. Just verification, if you will. I'm reasonably certain it's actually finished, but you never know. Is that even floating?
No.
It's not even floating. If it's not floating, that means I can't get an accurate reading. And it also makes it a lot harder to fill this guy up. Oh, look at that. I think I did it. It's floating! Because if it's not floating, that means it's sitting on the bottom and you're not getting a real reading. It needs to be floating like that. But you knew that already, right? So let's see. Last time we were at 1.022. What are we at this time? Looks like 1.022. Perfect. That means we can continue with the racking and bottling process, also known as finishing a mead. But first, gotta sample it to make sure. Plus it's half the fun of brewing.
It's the brewer's prerogative.
Okay. Lemon on the smell. A little bit of lemon. I get like the tea. Almost, remember the tea wine, tea mead that we made? Mm-hmm. Tastes kind of like that. There is black tea in this. We actually dry hopped it with black tea. So I'm going to pour this right into this pitcher, because if I pour it into here, it could upset the lease and problems can ensue. All right, so as we like to do, we are going to rack it into a pitcher first. And we do that mostly so that we can measure and know how many bottles we have, but also partially it just makes it a little bit easier if you can't see the bottom all the time, so that way we know we're not picking up too much lees. Lees would be the dregs at the bottom, the things that nobody really wants to drink, although I know a couple people that do. John, I'm looking at you. You know who you are. Right now your wife is laughing. Because she's the one that told me you do that.
And it's always a good day when we can make Stacy laugh.
Mm-hmm. In case I haven't mentioned it recently, because they start at 1.140 and ended at 1.022, that means it's about 15.5% alcohol, which is kind of cool because this is our first time using Premier Blanc yeast. We also used Fermaid O in this, and I think Fermaid O may suffer from the same problem as yeast hulls, and that it keeps things a little cloudy. Now, I'm okay with that. That doesn't really bother me at all. So if you really want your things to be not cloudy, you may want to skip the Fermaid O or the yeast hulls. Do they make a huge difference in fermentation? Yeast hulls, I don't really think so.
The verdict is still out, to be honest.
Yeah.
We did a test on yeast hulls versus nothing, and to us, the difference wasn't significant enough to really merit any...
It was slightly faster, and there was a few points difference. I'd probably have to do that test 30 times with different things to really see if there's a trend. To me, the difference wasn't that much, if that's the difference is going to be. Now, Fermaid O, whole different story. There's more stuff going on in Fermaid O. It actually has a nitrogen source. So that may actually do more and might be the reason why this went above the tolerance of the yeast that we used.
We do plan on doing another test, including Fermaid O, so keep a lookout for that.
I do have a little film of milky lees at the bottom here. I call it milky. It's not really a real name. It just kind of looks like milk solids sitting at the bottom. That's the easiest way to describe it. But we're not losing a lot of product this time at all. I mean, literally like an ounce or two. That's it, because it went clear to the bottom nicely. Okay, so now we're going to rack from this pitcher into these bottles. Now, if you don't have an auto siphon at this point, if you have a really good pitcher, you can pour it. I don't really like to, but people always ask me, oh, what if I don't have that? Okay, you can. Is it the best way to go? No. Now, this brew is 15.5%, so the likelihood of making vinegar, pretty much nil. You almost can't make vinegar this way, but you could oxidize and create off flavors if this is stored for a long time. So it's best to try to eliminate as much oxygen as possible. The other advantage to using a pitcher, like I said, is we know how much is in here. And we have about 3.2 liters or so. So that comes to 4 1/3 bottles, roughly, okay? So for me, that's cool because that means that last third of a bottle is our taster. That'll happen for the next video that you're going to see in a couple of days when we do a full-on tasting. That way we don't really waste any, okay? And we don't even have to refrigerate it because we're going to do it right after this.
So we have augmented our auto siphon by attaching the bottling wand to one end and removing the safety cap from the intake because we know there's no longer lees in this because we just racked it.
Those of you that watch this show regularly know that I call this a jiggly thing or
Springy
something
thing.
springy thing. See, I don't even know what I call it anymore because somebody told me it's a stem valve, so now I have to say that every time. And I always used to just call it a springy thingy, and now it's a jiggly thingy. Somehow
Which
it
is
morphed.
something completely different.
Yeah, and it's a stem valve. What it does is it lets the liquid flow or stop, but depending on you understand. This is an unscripted show, folks. You never know what's going to happen.
All right, am I holding this?
You're holding the bottle.
Okay.
I'm holding the
You're
pitcher.
holding that.
It's always good to know who's doing what.
Communication is key.
We have had bottles fall over before and had this fly out before because we both thought we were doing the same job. Not today. However, once I get it started, I usually take over on the bottling just because I have larger hands so I can actually hold 2 bottles at once. See, I can still talk with one hand and bottle with the other, but you do want to keep an eye on it because it'll spill out. We've had that happen too. But bottling is boring, so we'll see in a minute. So we got our 4 full bottles and one that's about 1/3, and we have a teeny tiny little bit left in here, but I have this handy dandy pitcher that I love oh so much, link in the description, that has this lovely spout, so I can just pour it right in. without any waste. Look at that. Made my day.
Now, ideally, we would not recommend the pouring method, particularly in a bottle with this much headroom, but we know this is going to be gone like that.
Yep,
so
she's going to drink it all. No, I'm just kidding.
No worries.
Well, that's a good tasting, a third of a bottle. It's like a quarter of a bottle, really. So what's going to happen with these?
They're going to sit.
But this one's going to get drank.
And so is this one. And so is this one. And so is this one. And then this one
Went to
we
market?
drunk as well in a year.
Yeah. We put one aside for a year. So a year from now, you will see us taste it again. Now, it's difficult because we can't actually do like a time warp and do the tasting of like immediate and a year from now. So we kind of just have to remember. We usually will watch the video again and take notes, and that way we have an idea. But if you like this video, look up. There's another one. You might like that too.